Monkey, Chapter 12. The gale of dark wind that blew through the gates of death when they opened carried Liu, his wife, and the demon that escorted them all the way to the city of Chiang. Liu's soul was blown straight to the imperial stores, but Blue Lotus's soul was carried to the inner gardens. It happened that at this time the princess Jade Bud was walking slowly on the green moss under the blossoming trees. The demon escort gave her a shove, and she fell onto the ground, whereupon he filched her soul and inserted Blue Lotuses in it. Then he vanished to the realms of death. The princess's attendants, seeing her lying as though dead, rushed into the palace of golden bells, crying, "Our Lady, the princess has fallen down dead." The empress in turn rushed in consternation to the emperor, who nodded and sighed, saying, "This does not surprise me. When I asked the judges of death about the prospects of my family, they told me that my sister had not long to live." When they all went to the spot where the princess had fallen, they found that she was still breathing faintly. "Raise no cry," commanded the emperor. "We must not disturb her." He then supported the princess's head with his hand, and after a moment announced, "She is coming to." The princess now suddenly rolled over and cried, "Wait for me, husband, I can't keep pace with you." "Sister," said the emperor, "we are all here." She raised her head and stared at him. "Who are you?" she cried, "and how dare you lay hands upon me?" "I am your royal brother, royal sister," he said. "I haven't got any royal brother," she cried, "and I am not anyone's royal sister either. I am Blue Lotus and my husband is Liu Chuan. We are both from the city of Chuan. 3 months ago I had words with my husband and hanged myself from the house beam with my sash. My husband followed me to death, bringing some melons as a present to the judges of the dead. Yama took pity on us and sent us back to life. He went on ahead, and hurrying after him I tripped and fell. But there's no reason why you should mishandle me. Here you are mauling me about, and you didn't even know my name." "I can't make head or tail of this," said the emperor. "Evidently she has hurt herself and is delirious." He ordered the court physician to bring medicines and help the princess back to her apartments. Presently it was announced that the melon bearer had returned, and Liu Chuan was shown in and gave a full report on his mission. "But what has become of my wife?" he wound up. "I have no idea." "Did Yama say anything in particular to us?" asked the emperor. "He said nothing," replied Liu, "but I heard a demon officer say that her body would be no good, as she had been dead too long, and Yama said, 'The Princess Jade Bud is due to die. You had better take her body and put Blue Lotus's soul into it.' I don't know where this princess is to be found. If I did, I should go and call upon her." "Why, that explains everything," said the emperor. "You remember how the princess said, 'Husband, wait for me,' and so on? All is now clear." "Let us send for the princess herself," suggested Wei Cheng, "and see what she has to say." The ladies who went to fetch the princess found her in her rooms, shouting, "What are you trying to dose me for? This isn't my home. I live in a decent tiled house, not in a sickly yellow place like this. That looks as if it had got jaundice. Let me out, let me out." A number of ladies in waiting and eunuchs caught hold of her and carried her, still shouting and protesting, into the emperor's presence. "Would you recognize your husband?" he asked. "What a question," she explained. "We have pledged to one another when we were children, and I have had children by him. How could I fail to know him?" Liu Chuan was then sent for, and she rushed at him, saying, "Why ever did you go on ahead like that, and not wait for me? I stumbled and fell down. When I came to, I found all these people gathered round me. I'd like to know what it all means." Liu did not know what to do. The voice was certainly that of his wife, but her appearance was entirely different. The kindly emperor stepped in, ordering that all the princess's toilet boxes, dresses, combs, and whatnot should be handed over to Liu Chuan, exactly as though he had been given his sister in marriage. He also granted Liu permanent exemption from forced labour, and sent the pair back to Chonchua. Meanwhile, the minister, Wei Qi, went to Kaifeng with a store of silver and gold to pay back the money lent by Hasing Liang. Now Hasing Liang was a water carrier, and his wife made a living by selling pottery. They only spent on themselves what was necessary to keep them alive. All the rest they gave to priests, or spent on paper cash which they dedicated and burned. Consequently, though in this world they ranked as pious people, but very poor, in the world below they gradually accumulated a very considerable fortune. When Wei Qi came to their door, laden with silver and gold, their astonishment knew no bounds, accompanied as he was by a numerous following of horsemen and coaches. They were reduced to speechless consternation, and throwing themselves onto their knees, they bowed low and long. "Rise," said Wei Chi. "I have merely come to repay the money that you were good enough to lend to His Majesty the Emperor." "We have never lent money to anyone," they stammered, "and cannot possibly accept what does not belong to us." "I am aware," said he, "that you are poor people, but owing to your constant alms and dedication of paper cash to the spirits of the world below, you have great sums to your credit in that world. Recently, when the Emperor spent 3 days in the realms of death, he had occasion to borrow heavily from your account there, and now I have come to repay the debt." "It is true," they said, "that we have something to our account in that world, but what proof have we that His Majesty borrowed from us there? We could not dream of accepting." "The loan," said Wei Chi, "was authorized by Zhu Chao, one of the assessors there, and he could bear testimony." "That's as may be," they said, "but nothing will induce us to accept." Finding that they were obdurate, Wei Chi sent a report to the Emperor, who remarked on reading it, "Such virtue is indeed rare among the rich," and he issued a rescript that with the money a temple was to be built and a shrine at the side of it dedicated to the Hassings. A site was found on ground not required either by the people or the military authorities, to the extent of 50 acres, and when the building was finished, it was called the Hassing Kua National Temple, and a great inscription gave an account of its inauguration and the fact that the building of it had been superintended by Wei Chi. This is the great Hassing Kua Temple that still stands today. The next thing to think about was the general mass for the dead, and the Emperor had promised to celebrate. Priests of particular learning and piety were collected from all over China and asked to sit in solemn congregation, and select from among their number one whose outstanding holiness fitted him to take charge of the ceremonies. The choice fell upon the priest Hussan Zhang, who was brought before the Emperor and presented by the minister Hassi Yul, and the rest, who said, "We have carried out the august commands, and this is the holy man on whom the choice has fallen. He is called Hussan Jiang." After reflecting for a while, the Emperor said, "The choice is a good one. I have heard of this priest, and it is certain that he is a man of high virtue and great powers of concentration." And turning to Hussan Jiang, he said, "I bestow upon you the rank of supreme controller of all priests and all matters of religion throughout the land." And in addition, he gave him a cassock of brocade and a golden skull cup, bidding him to use his best endeavours. Then he sent him back to his own temple to choose a lucky day for the great ceremony. Hussan Zhang, when the necessary seats and benches had been made and the music provided, selected 1,200 worthy priests to take part in the ceremony. The 3rd day of the 9th month was found by the astrologers to be favourable, and on that day began the great mass that was to last for 49 days, and was attended by the Emperor and his family, the court and all the ministers, civil and military. Meanwhile, the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin had been looking everywhere in Chiang for a priest to fetch the scriptures from India. Hearing that the Emperor Zhang was celebrating a great mass, and that the ceremony was being directed by that river float with whose birth she had herself been connected, who, she asked herself, could be better fitted for that mission than he? And she set out into the streets, taking with her moksha and the treasures that Buddha had given to her. What were these treasures, you ask? They were a magic braided Cossack and a priest's staff with 9 rings. Apart from these, there were the 3 magic fillets which she left in safe keeping for future use, only taking with her the cassock and staff. Wandering about the streets of Chang'an was a stupid priest who had failed to be chosen to take part in the mass. Seeing the Bodhisattva disguised as a shabby priest, barefoot and in rags, holding up this shining cassock as though for sale, he remembered that he still had a few strings of cash upon him, and coming forward he said, "What would you take for the cassock?" "The cassock," said Wan Yin, "is worth £5,000, the staff 2,000. £7,000 for a couple of coarse, low-class articles like that? You must be mad," he said. "Why, if it were guaranteed that the user of them would be immortal, or that he would become a living Buddha, they wouldn't fetch that price. Be off with you, I don't want them." The Bodhisattva said not a word more, but signing to Moksha went on her way. They had not gone far before they reached the Eastern Flower Gate, where whom should they meet but the minister Hassi Yul, just returning from court. His outriders were clearing the streets, but Kuan Yin, so far from removing herself, stood right in the minister's path, holding up the cassock. He reined in his horse, and seeing the dazzling object held up in front of him, he told a servant to ask the price. £5,000 for the cassock, and 2,000 for the staff, said Kuan Yin. What makes them so expensive? Asked Hsu. The cassock, said Kuan Yin, would be valuable to some people and quite the reverse to others. It would cost some people a lot of money, and others none at all. What does that mean? Asked Hsu. The wearer of my cassock, said Kuan Yin, will not be drowned or poisoned or meet wild beasts upon his way. But that is only if he is a good man. If it gets onto the back of a gluttonous, lustful priest, or one who does not keep his vows, or of a layman who destroys scriptures and speaks evil of Buddha, he will rue the day that he saw this cassock. And what do you mean, asked Hsu, by saying that it will cost some people a lot of money and others none at all? To a purchaser who does not reverence Buddha's law and free treasures, the price of the cassock and staff together would be £7,000, said Kuan Yin. But a pious and reverent man, devoted to our Buddha, could have them both for the asking. Hearing this, Hsu dismounted, and bowing respectfully, Reverend sir, he said, the emperor of this great land is himself a most devout man, and all his ministers vie with one another in carrying out his behests. At present he is celebrating a great mass, and this cassock might well be worn by the high priest Zhang, who is in charge of the whole ceremony. Let us go to the palace and speak to the emperor about this. The emperor was delighted at this proposal, and at once told Zhang to put on the cassock and hold the staff in his hand. Then he appointed a retinue to accompany him, and had him led through the city in triumph, for all the world like a successful candidate at the examinations. In the great city of Chang'an, travelling merchants and tradesmen, princes and nobles, writers and scholars, grown men and young girls all fought with one another for good places from which to view the procession. A noble priest, a Lohan come to earth, a living Bodhisattva, they cried in admiration when they saw Zhang pass. And the priest in his temple, when he returned, seeing him thus accoutred, could scarcely believe that it was not the Bodhisattva Kistagaba himself who had come to visit them. Time passed, and now at last came the final ceremonies of the 49th day, at which Zhang was to deliver the closing ceremony. The great mass closes today, said Kuan Yin to Moksha. Let us mingle in the throng, so that we may see how the ceremonies are conducted, and what blessings there is in our gift, and hear what school of Buddhism he preaches. The great Zhang, mounted on a high dais, first read the sutra on the salvation of the dead, then discussed the collect upon the security of kingdoms, and finally expounded the exhortation to pious works. At this point Kuan Yang approached the diocese and cried in a loud voice, "Why can't you give us some big vehicle scriptures?" So far from being put out by this interruption, Zhang was delighted to hear of other scriptures, and scrambling down from the dais, he saluted his interrupter and said, "Reverend sir, forgive me for not knowing that I had one so learned as you in my audience. It is true that we have none of us any knowledge of the big vehicle, and have only expounded the little vehicle." "Your little vehicle," said Kuan Yin, "cannot save the souls of the dead, and only leads to general misapprehension and confusion. I have 3 sections of the great vehicle teaching, called the Tripitaka, or 3 baskets. These can carry the souls of the dead to heaven, can save all those that are in trouble, can add immeasurably to life's span, and can deliver those that trust in it from the comings and goings of incarnation." At this point one of the ushers rushed to the emperor and announced that 2 shabby priests had interrupted the master, pulling him down from the dais, and started some nonsensical argument with him. The emperor ordered them to be seized and brought to him. On appearing before the emperor, they did not prostrate themselves or even salute him, but merely asked what he wanted of them. "Are you not the priest who gave me the cassock the other day?" said the emperor. "I am," said Kuan Yin. "You had a perfect right," said the emperor, "to come here and listen to the preaching, eat with the other priests and go away quietly, but you have no business to interrupt the preaching and disturb the whole proceedings." "Your preacher," Kuan Yin said, "knows only about the little vehicle which cannot save souls. We possess the Tripitaka of the big vehicle, which saves the souls of the dead and secures those that are in peril." The emperor was delighted at this news, and asked at once where it was. "It is in India," said Kuan Yin, "at the temple of the great thunderclap, where the Buddha Tathagata dwells." "Do you know these teachings by heart?" asked the emperor. "I do," said the Bodhisattva. "Then Zhang shall retire," said the emperor. and you shall mount the dais and expound them to us." But instead of doing so, Kuan Yin floated up into the sky and revealed herself in all the glory of her true form, holding the willow spray and the sacred vase, while Muksha stood on her left side, holding his staff. The emperor hastened to prostrate himself, and all his ministers knelt down and burned incense, while the audience, priests, nuns, officers, craftsmen and merchants bowed down, crying, "The Bodhisattva! The Bodhisattva!" The emperor's joy was so great that he forgot his rivers and hills. His ministers in their excitement broke every rule of etiquette, and all the multitude murmured again and again, "Glory be to the great Bodhisattva Kuan Yin." His Majesty decided to have a picture of the Bodhisattva painted by a skillful artist in full colours. His choice fell upon Wo Zhao Zhu, that genius of the brush, that prodigy of portraiture, that fabulous embodiment of vision and inspiration. It was this painter who afterwards made the portraits of the heroes of the dynasty in the Tower of Rising Smoke. He now wielded his magic brush and rendered every detail of these sacred forms. Presently the figures began to recede further and further into the sky, and finally their golden effulgence could be seen no more. At this point the emperor dismissed the assembly and declared that the next thing to do was to find a traveller who would go to India and fetch the scriptures. An inquiry was made in the temple, and Hussein-Zang immediately came forward and, bowing low, said, "I am a humble cleric, devoid of any capacity, but I am ready to undertake the quest of these scriptures, be the fatigues and difficulties what they may, if by doing so I may promote the security of your Majesty's streams and hills." The emperor was delighted, and raising him from his knees with his royal hand, "Reverend sir," he said, "if indeed you are willing to do me this loyal service, undeterred by the length of the journey and all the mountains and rivers that you will have to cross, I will make you my bond brother." And true to his word, in front of the Buddha image in that temple, he bowed 4 times to Hussein-Zang and addressed him as "Holy priest, my brother." Hussein-Zang, on his side, burning incense before the Buddhas, swore to do all that lay in his power to reach India. "And if I do not reach India, and do not bring back the scriptures, may I fall into the nethermost pit of hell, rather than return empty-handed to China." When Hussein-Zang rejoined the other priests, they pressed round him, asking whether it was indeed true that he had sworn to go to India. "For I've heard," one of them said, "that it is a very long way, and that on the road there are many tigers, panthers, and evil spirits. I fear you will not come back to us alive." "I have taken my oath," said Hussein-Zang, "and I must faithfully fulfil it. I know well enough that the hazards of such a journey are great." And presently he said, "My disciples, I may be away for 2 or 3 years, or 5 or 7. If you see the branches of the pine tree at the gate turning eastward, you will know that I am coming back. If not, it will mean that I shall never return." Early next day, in the presence of all his ministers, the emperor signed a receipt authorising Hussein-Zang's quest and stamped it with the seal of free passage. The astrologers announced that the posture of the heavens made the day particularly favourable for the start of a long journey. At this point Hussein-Zang himself was announced. "Brother," said the emperor, "I am told that this would be a lucky day for you to start. Here are your travelling papers, and here is a golden bowl for you to collect alms in during your journey. I have chosen 2 followers to go with you and a horse for you to ride. It only remains for you to start." Hussein-Zang was ready enough, and taking the emperor's present set out towards the gate of the city, accompanied by the emperor and a host of officials. When they reached the gates, they found that the priests of the Hungfang temple were waiting there with a provision of water and summer clothing. When it had been added to the luggage, the emperor told a servant to bring wine, and raising the cup, he asked Hussein-Zang if he had a by-name. "Being a priest," said Hussein-Zang, "I have not thought it proper to assume a by-name." "The Bodhisattva mentioned," said the emperor, "that the scriptures in India are called the Tripitaka. How would it be if you took Tripitaka as yours by name?" Hussein-Zang accepted with thanks, but when he was offered the wine cup he declined, saying that abstinence from wine was the first rule of priesthood, and that he never took it. "This is an exceptional occasion," said the emperor, "and the wine is not at all strong. Just drink 1 cup to speed you on your journey." Tripitaka dared not refuse, but just as he was going to drink, the emperor stooped down and with his royal fingers scooped up a handful of dust and threw it into the cup. At first Tripitaka could not make out why he had done this, but the emperor said, laughing, "Tell me, brother, how long do you expect to be away? I hope, said Tripitaka, to be back in 3 years. That's a long time, said the Emperor, and you have a long way to go. You would do well to drink this cup, for are we not told that a handful of one's country's soil is worth more than 10,000 pounds of foreign gold? Then Tripitaka understood why the Emperor had thrown the dust into the cup, drank it down to the last dregs, and set about his way. And if you do not know how he fared upon that way, listen to what is told in the next chapter.